All right. What's going on, people? Hope everybody is well. On this fine Wednesday, day before my son goes back to school, and I have a little bit of time before my school year starts. Let's see, what's good? What's good, people? See a few of you in the chat. Had some technical issues, so bear with me a bit. Starting a little later than I like to, but we are going. What's up, Queen Kalila? How you doing, lady? Brother Barry, Clutch and Stick. What's going on? Let's see. Mr. Donnie Mack, what's happening? J. Cleveland Green, Ron Matthews, Brandon, Eric, salute. Mr. Good Dad, loving that name. That's what's up. 2MC, what's happening? Yeah. Appreciate that Cash App expansion wiring. Before I even had to say anything, much appreciated. Yeah. So we got a lot to get into tonight, but bear with me. I'm playing catch up because my little system decided to act a little up, and this usually happens right before showtime. It's just like when I assign a paper in class, everybody's computer or printer breaks down the day it's due. It is what it is. What's up, Mike? All right. Let's get a few things in. First and foremost, welcome back to the Onyx Report. Hope everybody is well. This is, let's see, this is there we go, where we as Black male justice advocates uplift Black men and boys using critical analysis. And we will continue with that. All right, Brother Smith, Dr. Smith, how you doing, sir? I got a concept for you tonight. I think you're gonna be able to sink your teeth into. So hope you have some time. But before I delve in, I'd like to give some thanks to my subscribers and supporters. So let's go ahead and do that. Check it out. All right, so shout out to my subscribers. I definitely appreciate the support. Let me get this up here. So make sure you support the show, subscribe, join, hit the like button, share the video, donate and support the show if you would. There's the Patreon, the Cash App, the PayPal, and even the Venmo option. And you can actually sign up for different levels of membership. Go ahead and do that right here on YouTube. Click the join and the subscribe button, and you can choose your level of membership. Or you can go to the Patreon, where you see the URL just under my video. Go there, and you can actually become a supporter of the Onyx Report, or you can become an ongoing supporter of the Institute for Black Male Studies. You can also look into some of the merchandise there. I'll kind of remind you a little bit later tonight. So there are a lot of ways to support, and I hope that you do. All right. There we go. All right. So we're getting it in. Appreciate that, BGS. Got BGS in the house. Brother Damon, what's going on? MLR, appreciate that Cash App. Extended Clips, what's going on? It's about 46 odd people across Facebook and YouTube. So people are coming in. I know I'm a little bit late, and I didn't put up advertisement because still preparing for my semester. So anyway, we haven't done these in a while. I'm getting back to them. And as I said, these are fairly organic, right? But this is going back to our hashtag SacredBlackMasculine Series, because we celebrate Black men and boys over here. We celebrate their accomplishments. We celebrate what we are doing in the world. But it is organic. So it's as it comes across my desk. So sometimes it may be a couple years old. Sometimes it may be something happening right now. So feel free to continue to send me them. You can also tweet them to me or post them or send them to me in Facebook Messenger, whatever it is. Or you can go to my website and you can see it just on the screen right beneath the area where it says Sacred Black Masculine. If you look underneath that, you'll see www.hasanjohnson.com. There's an email on that webpage that you can email me from, and go ahead and send me articles of Black male accomplishments. What's good, brother MLR? Brother Damon, I have not seen Dennis Sperling's video about COVID. You're usually pretty good at sending them to me. If you have already, I'll check it. If you haven't, please do. I'd like to check that out. But yeah, send that to me. I hope you're well out there in Philly, doing your thing. Anyway, so Sacred Black Masculine Series, where we are celebrating Black males for a variety of different types of accomplishments. And the first one up tonight is based on an article that can be found on legit.ng. And this is entitled, "Kind Boy Makes Classmate Who Wears Same Clothes to School Smile." They I don't know why they misspelled the title, but anyway, kind boy makes classmate who wears same clothes to school smile, gives him 3 bags of designer clothes. A young boy named Braden put a big smile on his classmate's face and did the best he could do for him when he realized he was being bullied for wearing the same outfit. In speaking with the media, Braden revealed that while he is not super close to him, he never liked the way he was being picked on by people. Understanding Compassion reports. Braden said the boy did not have many clothes because his parents are poor. He said, "Pay attention, install our latest app." So what happens when you copy and paste? Sometimes the advertisements come with it. He said, "I remember last year he only had 2 outfits because he just didn't have the money to buy clothes." The helper stated that he does not want the boy's name in the media, as he shared how he was a big subject of ridicule among his peers. One day, he took the young boy to a place in the school, and presented the bags of new outfits to him. The things he gave the boy, Braden told him, "You got joggers, Nike, Adidas, Hollister shirts, sweatshirts. It's all nice. And you have more joggers in here." So he just kind of ran him through what he gave him. After people learned of Braden's act of love, many wanted to give the student more. They set up a fundraiser and have so far gathered more than $7,000. Meanwhile, legit.ng earlier reported that a 13-year-old boy named William Preston did not like the way his mother was going through life's tough challenges as a single mother of 3. As a way to help his mother, William got a job as a lawnmower as part of a plan to get his mother a vehicle. When the teen came home one day and told his mother he got her a car, the woman laughed it off and said, "Yeah, right," but apparently he did. This looks like it just kind of might have been a little bit of a accident in the copying and pasting, but nevertheless, shout out to Braden, right? And you notice by extending love to the young brother in his class, it gave other people permission to do the same. So shout out to him for doing so. You know what? That's what's up. That's what's up. That's a beautiful thing. And the young man needs to be supported, and we need to make sure we urge others to do the same. And that goes in a lot of different ways. When you actually, sometimes it's just a matter of even speaking truth. You give other people permission to do the same. So, shout out to him for that. Right? Okay. All right. And then next up, this is from Fox26Houston.com. It's entitled, "The First Black Male Valedictorian at His High School Headed to Harvard and Hoping to Encourage Other Young Men." Right? This is says Spring, Texas. A young man who made history there in Houston, becoming the first black male valedictorian at his high school, who's now headed to Harvard, hopes to motivate other youngsters in this positively Houston. I don't know what that is. Anyway, when you hear someone enjoying such amazing success, receiving nearly $750,000 in scholarships, being accepted into 11 of the best schools in the world, you think there must be a formula. Well, Davion Tatum is sharing what worked for him to help inspire other young men. He said, I was accepted into Stanford, Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Brown, UPenn. Tatum smiles, and that's actually only some of the universities, the now Harvard-bound 18. Appreciate the support, Michael. Thank you. That's only some of the universities the now Harvard-bound 18-year-old received acceptance letters from. My story specifically can help other young black men to know that just because society may say one thing about you, there may be a stigma or stereotype that surrounds being a black man. Doesn't necessarily mean you're confined to that. Right? It says the history-making Westfield High School first black male valedictorian has achieved so much success. He finished an autobiography entitled Thriving in My Own Lane. It was to show that regardless of what's happening around me, I'm going to continue thriving in my own lane. I'm going to continue pushing for equity, inclusivity, and justice. So shout out to Davion. I think I'm pronouncing that right. You know what I'm saying? Spring, Texas. Yeah, Clutch and Stick. Affluent North Houston suburb. I see. I didn't know that. Never been there. Someone else says Spring isn't affluent, but it's nice. I'd never heard of it. So, but either way, salute to the young brother. Right. So shout out to him for that. We got 74 watching. Hoping the numbers go up, but I didn't give a lot of leeway for today's show, so it'll probably be a little slower than usual. And we started a little bit late. But for those of you just coming in, please make sure you like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel as we go through. Okay, so let's see here. So next up, we have a little bit of a special shout out. This is probably not the best way to introduce it. It's not really a shout out. It's really kind of a part two to a story we talked about when it initially occurred. And that is a little more information about one Tommy Tiny Lister and his cause of death. Many of you remember that a while back, this brother had passed away, and I actually did a special video dedicated to him where I took a clip from one of his performances and kind of talked about what it meant for me to see that. You know, many of us kind of grew up with Tiny, whether it was in Friday or a number of other depictions of Batman, or even in, I remember when I was real young, he did a movie with Hulk Hogan. It was absolutely horrible, but it was still, it was still good to see him. Thanks for that, T Fitness. I hope you're well, good brother. And Crispus, thank you for the Cash App, generous Cash App. I really appreciate that. Thank you. So here's the thing. A lot of celebrities and particularly rappers have been dying lately. You know, we just have found out not long ago about, oh goodness, there's so many of them. There's like a list I posted on Facebook a while back, but Biz Markie was one of the more recent. Of course, DMX, there have been a number of others. But a lot of them, we haven't found out the cause of death. Like MF Doom died last Halloween. We didn't find out, I think it was around December. And I still haven't heard the official cause of death. So if anybody has some of that information, definitely put that up. Yeah, Joshua, Zeus. Tiny was Zeus. And Hogan was scared of him. I think between that and Rocky 3, that was one of the reasons I loved it, because I saw these really powerful black men that the white protagonist was scared of. So it was interesting to me. I always rooted for Clubber Lang in Rocky 3, you know. But anyway, I love when he showed up and embarrassed Rocky in front of his wife. Anyway, I don't want to. There's something about that I was intrigued about as a kid, you know. Anyway, but no, yeah, Shock G. Shock G, that still gets to me, man, because there's always just been something about Shock that, you know, I've always appreciated. So, you know, hearing that he passed, you know, yeah. Hip hop is not necessarily known Thanks, Brother Stewart, for the PayPal. Appreciate that. Hip hop is not necessarily known for promoting a healthy lifestyle, and and in many other cases, we don't really know what's going on. But apparently, there's an article that came out on TMZ.com where they finally got the cause of death, and it's entitled "Tommy Tiny Lister had COVID-19 when he died, but heart disease is what actually killed him." It said Lister's loved ones suspected he did have COVID at the time of his death, but the LA County... Appreciate the support, no one. Salute to you as well. It says, but the LA County medical examiner says that's not what caused his death. According to his autopsy, the Friday star died of hypertensive and atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, commonly called heart disease. Forgive me if I mispronounced any of that. It's not necessarily my area of expertise. Anyway, it says in the docs obtained by TMZ, the ME also says a nasal swab came back positive for COVID-19 and notes Tommy had fluid in his chest when he died. Additionally, he had an enlarged heart with high blood pressure, poor circulation in his legs, and coronary artery disease. I can't help but wonder if steroid use at any point may have been a factor, and I don't really know a lot about, Lister in terms of that, but I know, I grew up in the 80s and my father was a bodybuilder. And that was one of the things, he and I used to look at and talk about. You got to have something you connect with your kids about. And, I only saw him. Appreciate that support, Barry. I only saw him every now and again, so we connected on a couple of things. He was a trucker and he was a bodybuilder. So we would talk about trucks and bodybuilding, and he was an artist. So we would collect different, drawing utensils. Those are the three subjects we had that connected us: art, bodybuilding, and trucking. And, he was part of that 80s wave of bodybuilders. So with the rise of Arnold Schwarzenegger, late 70s, early 80s, and those dudes were monsters. I mean, I remember he used to take me to Gold's Gym and I would see these dudes and I was like 6. These guys were like mountains. But it wasn't until decades later I found out just how much they were doing, as far as steroid use. And apparently Arnold himself admitted to that, but a lot of those dudes, it's kind of like the old WWE wrestlers. A lot of those dudes died. And if they, even up leading to their deaths, they were in horrible kind of conditions because of the steroid use, the abuse to the body. And so, I can't help but wonder that when I look at this story, if any of that may have played a role with Brother Lister, but I don't know. So I'm not suggesting it did. I don't have any evidence to that. It's just a question. But it says TMZ broke the story. The 62-year-old actor died suddenly last year at his LA area home. Paramedics responded, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. So just a little bit more information about him. I hope we'll get more about some of the others. For some reason, there's something about MF Doom that I cannot, get away from. I mean, if anybody has any information, I'd definitely like to know. Appreciate the support, Mr. K. But Doom, we all know he lost his brother. That kind of led him away from his earlier, career persona and helped create MF Doom. But then recently, before his passing, he lost his son. And, no parent wants to outlive their child. But people often underestimate just how traumatic loss of one's child's life is to Black fathers. Nobody really talks about that. And shout out to Terrain Walker. Look for Terrain on Twitter. He's also here on YouTube. I don't know if he released the video on YouTube yet. I haven't seen it, but he and Hood Scholar actually did a video on Twitter. And you can find Terrain Walker on Twitter, Black journalist. We had him here on the show last year. And he did a sit down in Ferguson with Black fathers who lost their children. And they just did a round robin discussion on where they are with that, what their experiences are. And I realized when I watched it, I really can't say I'd ever seen anything like that. I don't know if I've ever actually seen, really just an open presentation of Black fathers emoting and talking about the loss of their children. We usually don't get that stage. And I think a lot of that has to do with people don't readily empathize with black men. They fear black men. You know, we're seen as the pit bulls of the world. So, you know, if anything, it's, you know, a lot of people don't believe we feel anything. A lot of people don't believe we're capable. And I'm saying this as somebody who has sat in classes, not only generic courses at the university. I have sat in Africana Studies classes and listened to feminist professors tell me and the class that black men don't care about family. They don't care about kids. So when you can have such a stereotype be so prevalent, and this was at Temple, you know, this is the heart of Afrocentricity, and I'm hearing this from, you know, senior scholars who are teaching this. That tells you how deep and how far these stereotypes can run about black male, you know, monstrosity, or whatever you might want to call it. So that said, listening to that, I don't want to call it a show. I don't know what else to really call it, but listening to that video was powerful. So if you haven't had a chance, visit Terrain Walker on Twitter, look that up and take it in. It is extremely deep, and those brothers give some good information on how they navigated and survived one of the most traumatic events that a black man, a father, can experience. The loss of a child. And I talked about this on another video, and I wish I had actually connected the two, but it was a wholly different video. I was talking about what's the rapper Fetty Wap, who had lost his daughter, and talked about losing my own in 2000. I lost my daughter, so I know that feeling, and that's a tremendous one. So check that out. If you get a chance, support Terrain Walker. If you've not done so, try and link with him on Twitter, support his work, his channel. And I believe he recently started a YouTube channel here. So look up Terrain Walker here as well. And you know what? I think I'm mispronouncing his name, and I do apologize, brother, but I think it's Torraine Walker. Anyway, I do support his work. I'm a fan, and I do apologize for mispronouncing his name. What's up, Officer Faulkner? Good to see you in here. Extended clips, what's going on? All right. Okay. So, let's get into it. So just real quick, make sure you support the Institute for Black Male Studies. Go to instituteforblackmalestudies.com, and you can support the Institute by buying merchandise, or you can go to Patreon and just be a regular donor to support the Institute as well. Check that out. Website contains all kinds of interviews, courses, and webinars that you can sign in for. And there's everything all the way down to free elements on the site. So there's something for everyone as far as, you know, information on Black boys. And actually, if you haven't seen it, one of my former students, her name is Cara. She actually purchased one of the baby outfits. What do you call it? I forget what it's called. One of the onesies. She purchased the onesie from the Institute, and she actually had her son dressed in one, and she said that she would allow me to share the pictures, and I was moved by it. So this is her son, Carson. And Carson has become a new member of the Institute for Black Male Studies, and quite possibly the new face of it as he wears the little logo and onesie for the Institute itself. So, you know, shout out to Carson, shout out to his mother for allowing that. But this is, you know, this is a gorgeous kid, and you know, I just had to share it. I mean, absolutely beautiful kid. And I'm a sucker for cheeks. So you know, when my son was that little, I was wearing them cheeks out all day, just kissing his face. You know, I loved it. So I love seeing kids, love seeing babies, and definitely love seeing happy Black boys. And his mother and father are clearly doing a beautiful job with him, with that smile on his face. So shout out to them. And thanks for supporting the Institute for Black Male Studies. All right. So shout out to Carson. You know, Yeah, so sorry about that, but had to go there. Kid was too cute to ignore that. So, what are we talking about tonight? What are we dealing with? Well, as you know, title of the show is Black Andromortality, the need for a more critical assessment of Black male death. And what the hell am I talking about? Well, earlier this week in one of my daily videos, I did a review of an article that was produced by a study at Yale. And this was a piece that I have now seen in at least 7 or 8 different places. That's one of the interesting things when you see these studies that are done by elite universities. You know, you'll see them everywhere. The initial one I read was on blackenterprise.com, and it was entitled Black Women Are Dying of COVID-19 at Higher Rates Than Men in Other Racial Ethnic Groups. And I did a review of the article. We read through it, and I kind of critiqued some of the things going on in it, right? But this was produced by what's referred to as Gender Sci Lab at Harvard, Harvard, not Yale, my apologies. And it was published in the Journal of General Internal Medicine. And it nevertheless, I'm thinking of, the Yale study had to do with mortality. That was a different one. So yeah, this was a Harvard study produced in the Gender Sci Lab. And basically what it covered is the high mortality rates of Black women in contrast, in comparison to white men, Latino men, and Asian men. And on the back end, they're women as well, because we know for the most part, men are dying more. But this whole paper was about that. And one of the interesting things I found when reading through it is they did acknowledge that Black men were dying at much higher rates than Black women. I was surprised they acknowledged it. Many papers like that, they won't. They really won't. But this time they did. It was just, a quick little bullet point in like half a sentence where they kind of acknowledged it. But obviously the whole theme and focus of the paper are Black women. And as I said in my review, it's not that I'm not upset that there needs to be a conversation about Black women's death. But here's the thing. I only found really one article covering the Black male experience in regard to COVID deaths. I did find a half of a piece that acknowledged that Black men lost the most number of years off their life expectancy just from 2020 alone. And that was it. Not a lot of discussion beyond that. No Harvard studies, no Yale studies, no intensive breakdowns. And really it got me thinking. Now, I cover in the video more detail on this. So if you want to know more about what I said or more about what the article says, you can go watch that video. And I included a link to the actual article in the description. So you can go through and look at it with some more detail. But what I came to was that, there's a whole area around male death that I haven't found really discussed in too many places. And I started to really reflect on male death and whether or not there were categories for it, right? Categories that survey male death. And the thing about it is, I couldn't find many. And I'm not talking about just COVID. I was talking about male death as a whole. And some of the accompanying terms I found that were kind of, in the ballpark were terms like androcide, right? And femicide. Now, what was interesting about those two is femicide is actually, really geared around the intentional killing or violent deaths of women and girls because of their gender, right? So that's actually become a term somewhat used in women and gender studies, right? Androcide, it does exist as a term, and it refers to the systemic killing of men, boys, or males in general, but it's not as well lauded, right? It's not talked about to any great extent. It's not backed up by anything. And that's mainly because, you really don't have male studies as any kind of formal contribution to the academy. So androcide is not quite as politicized, but both androcide and femicide speak to murders. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm not necessarily limiting this to murder, nor am I limiting it to COVID. I'm actually talking about areas where Black men in particular die to greater degrees than others, and whether or not there were any accompanying concepts that explained or at least attempted to survey those issues under the framework of Black men and death. I didn't find too many. So I started to look at how to describe that. And I started to look at this idea, taking the prefix, the Latin prefix for male, andro, and connecting it to mortality, having to do with death. But we're talking specifically about male deaths. So by referring to Black andromortality, I'm talking about any area that covers the deaths of Black men, especially when they're to a greater extent than other groups. It could be areas where they are primarily the ones dying. It could be areas where they're dying more than others. Either way, it's still dealing with a majority. But I wondered if you actually created, sorry, I'm wearing aligners. These things drive me nuts. They make it hard to talk. I have a lisp and they dry your mouth out, But anyway, I wanted to actually see if actually kind of surveying Black male death would give us a better sense of the vulnerability of Black male life and what we're looking at. Does it help us understand things in a slightly different light if we actually see how our mortality plays out across different areas, right? So I thought I'd go through a few bullet points, and maybe after doing so, welcome some people up and give their thoughts about what we're looking at, right? So let's see. So since I started with COVID, and because I was talking about the article that came out of the Gender Sci Lab at Harvard, these are the general mortality rates as they relate to race. Now, clearly, whites, have the highest numbers, so they're the largest population. But what the article from Gender Sci Lab does point out is when you look at the percentages in regard to the Black community, we are significantly smaller, 13% of society, but the mortality rates tend to be higher. And what they found was that Black women had a mortality rate that was 4 times higher than that of white men, 3 times higher than that of Asian men, as well as higher than white and Asian women. But Black men had a mortality rate that was higher than any other sex or racial group, including over 6 times higher than the rate of white men. So when you look at these numbers, the mortality rates aren't as easy to kind of see because they're given raw numbers. But all in all, we're finding that in this list, Black males tend to be dying to the greatest degree. Now, of course, this is a hot topic. Everybody's arguing about the legitimacy of this and that in regard to COVID. But what I'm asking a question about more particularly is, if Black men are dying to the highest degree due to COVID, how many of you have seen articles, documentaries, news footage covering the death of Black men? Don't worry, I'll wait. Doesn't seem to be very many. For every one you find, there should be 10. But anyway, doesn't seem to be the case. So in regard to Black andromortality, if you talk about COVID, you have to talk about Black men. That's the first. And then, of course, this, covers some of the rates that they were talking about in regard to those deaths. And you can see where it says Black and African American deaths per 100,000 by race and ethnicity. And this is specifically looking at COVID. But yet again, when we see Black, this isn't disaggregated by gender as well as race. And it doesn't have to be, but I think if Black men, see, here's the thing. I don't care what the area is. If Black folk are suffering more, it needs to be talked about for both genders or any other demographic in the community. However, if you find that Black men are significantly worse off, then that needs to be put in context and discussed as well. It shouldn't just be limited to a generic Black category unless the numbers are fairly even between Black men and women. If the numbers are even, then it's a Black issue. But if males are suffering to a far greater degree, it's not just a Black issue. It can be a Black issue, but it is also a Black male issue. And there's too little discussion about how differently Black males' quality of life is, even from other demographics in the Black community. So it needs to be talked about. So if we were going to talk about, breast cancer, we clearly don't talk about that as a Black issue, even though Black men, small percentage of which, somewhere between 2 and 4%, do get breast cancer. But we talk about it as a Black female issue because it is overwhelmingly such, and we should. But for some reason, when that happens to Black males, it remains a Black issue. Or it is considered a Black female issue, but it doesn't seem to be a Black male issue. Earlier tonight, this is not a formal part of this presentation, a good brother sent me a link to an article, or it's actually a video covering the development of new girl-only schools, Black girl-only schools in Brooklyn. And they talked, the woman that was, I think she's the principal, she talked about how she worked at several of those campuses and how they were trying to really focus on uplifting girls, and that was all great. No problem with that. But I read an article, I think maybe about a month ago, where I talked about something that BGS had sent me. It was an article, I think, out of Detroit or Chicago, forgive me. You can find the actual video and get the exact details. But basically what happened was when they tried to develop Black male-only schools, not only did they have all the traditional difficulty that such an endeavor would have from formal institutions, from white society or whatever, but the first people to respond and critique and put forth a lawsuit were the mothers in the community that argued that their girls were being barred from opportunity. And yet, when I see these videos about the rise of Black female-focused schools, I don't hear about fathers protesting. I don't even hear about those same mothers protesting about the lack of opportunity for their sons who are clearly doing worse off. We've talked about this multiple times. By the time they get to the 8th grade, only 10% are actually literate as far as Black boys, and only about 12% in regard to math and science. No major upheaval to focus on them. None. But when we talk about this, one of two things happen, and this is one of the things I'm pointing out. It's the reason I'm bringing this up, not bringing it up just to be, argumentative. What I'm saying is, when it comes to Black schools, we either opt for a co-ed dynamic or we opt for a female dynamic. There are, I'm assuming, some male schools here and there. Usually by the time I hear about them, they're gone. But my point is, when they do come about, the primary group that calls for their complete restructuring or their abolishment don't seem to actually care what happens to those boys who are doing worse. But when we focus on girls or we focus on co-ed, there's no problem. And nobody says anything about Black boys when we focus on girl-only schools. And many of these girls in this particular review, and I'll probably do a daily video on it, but many of them are going off and graduating and going to college, and that is great. I don't have a problem with that. I just have a problem with the degree to which boys are left in the lurches. And too few seem to care. I don't see the kind of upheaval that needs to be in place. So what I'm getting at is that tends to happen. And here, even on this chart dealing with COVID deaths, again, we revert back to the generic or co-ed notion of Black deaths. Still no focus on Black men. Let's proceed. What else can we learn in regard to Black andromortality? Well, this is one of the slides I use in my class. Information is a little bit older, but it still gets the point across. So some of this data might have changed a little bit. You can look it up yourself, but I think for the most part, the dynamics are still roughly the same, right? Talk about life expectancy. Black males tend to have the lowest. Usually for things like this, the only group that I see have comparable numbers, and I'm not saying that about life expectancy, but I wouldn't be surprised if it were, tend to be Native American men. That's usually the closest to Black men. Sometimes Native American men and Black men are neck and neck on certain issues, right? Police homicides, so on and so forth, depending on the year, But in regard to life expectancy, Black men tend to have the lowest. This directly speaks to something we can talk about in regard to Black death. We're kind of categorizing, we're kind of doing a survey of different areas where Black men suffer a loss of life to a greater degree. The subject matter having to do with death in some form. Well, life expectancy is about as broad as you can get. And we find that Black men die the earliest. So if I were to develop a subfield of study in Black male studies dealing with andromortality, this would be one of the first areas I would start looking at: the deaths of Black men, and looking at the contributing factors. Now, Black male studies scholars are already doing that, but I'm going to connect it to other forms of death. Now, looking right below it, you see 3 bullet points that cover suicide. And again, this is older, so we can look to present some new stuff. I didn't really have time. I was running, to put this up. So I pulled it out of one of my slides in class. But usually I have the students in class look it up. And generally what we find is, as far as Black males, life expectancy tends to remain the lowest. And what we find as a major trope in regard to what they refer to as suicidology is that girls and women attempt suicide in much higher numbers than boys and men, but boys and men complete suicide in much higher numbers than girls and women. That seems to be one of the most consistent tropes. And in regard to 2007, we found that in the African-American community, a significant portion, 82% of those committed suicide were male, Black male, obviously in the Black community. And you can see from there, from 81 to 94, suicide rate increased 83% for 15 to 24-year-old African-American males, 10% for females. Right? Males accounted for 90.5% of African-American elderly 65 and over suicides. So when I talk about andromortality, I'm not just arbitrarily, picking up stuff to complain about. I'm talking about areas where Black male death is not necessarily regarded. But if we connect the areas where they die the most, we start to see the tapestry, or the kind of tapestry that, if we step back from it, we can see cost Black men their lives to a far greater degree than other groups. So let's see. Next one up comes from Brookings, right? And this is coming out of the CDC National Center for Health Statistics, life expectancy, right? Black men die 4 years earlier than white men. So this is dated 2015. So just a little update to the last slide we had up a moment ago. And kind of see the framework here. Life expectancy at birth and life expectancy at age 65, Black men having the lowest. So even though you can see it's changed a little bit from the older information, it still is lower than every other group. Now, one of my theories in regard to this is that Black men, tend to, and there's a concept for it, there's a term we use, we tend to live by a John Henry type of code, right? We tend to sacrifice to a greater degree. Much of how we define Black masculinity is around sacrifice. See, this is interesting. When I hear people critiquing Black men on YouTube, articulating their frustrations and their issues and so on and so forth, one of the things I hear, especially from Black men themselves, is we just got to work harder. We got to try harder. We have been trying harder to the point of death for generations. How many of you who had grandfathers, and we talked about this in a prior show, how many of you had grandfathers, great-grandfathers, fathers, cousins, brothers, who literally died, worked themselves to death? And we often have the nerve to talk about it like Black men don't. I don't have anything with motivating each other to put and pushing ourselves to achieve, but don't be unrealistic. We actually kill ourselves to achieve already. And that is part of what it means to be Black and male. That's part of the definition of Black manhood in many circles. We push ourselves to death already. Part of why I think our life expectancy is lower is in terms of how we have to navigate. One of the papers I talked about in an earlier video this week dealing with Yale study that revealed that the more limited the opportunities for Black males, the higher their mortality rates. Homicide, suicide, and pure stress. These are real. These are not excuses. These are realities. We are already doing this. So when I hear people say, well, Black men don't try hard enough, you are out your damn mind. Black men work themselves to death. And my theory in regard to COVID is there may be some chromosomal issues in regard to the virus and all of that, but I argue that Black men never stopped working. Last year in the summer when things hit and began to increase, truckers, you name it. Black men were in fields where they were essential workers and they were dying. But nobody cared because it was 40-plus-year-old black men. And all we talked about is their poor health. We didn't talk about why. The idea around poor health is everybody sitting around doing nothing, getting fat. Actually, it could very well be that men were working their asses off and they never stopped. I don't know to what degree it played a role last year, but I do believe it did. And this, in terms of general life expectancy, and we've looked at the data in the previous slide, right? So this is earlier information coming out. Let's see, some of this is coming out of early 2000s. This is coming out of 2015. Black males still find themselves behind. Well, let's look at another area.
Well, welcome to the Terror Dome.
Appreciate the membership, K-Ron. Welcome to the Brotherhood of the Onyx Report. Hope everybody's well. Again, 183 watching. Like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel. Not able to really keep up with the chat, but I know my brother BGS and Barry and a number of others are in there, so I hope my mods are handling it. Not going to spend a great deal of time here, but this is basically a breakdown of all cancers from 1999 to 2011, and it's looking at where men find themselves, particularly in regard to prostate cancer. There's even some information here on heart disease, and we'll look at cancer and heart disease a little bit more, in a different slide. We'll look at the impact of it. But what you can see is on the left you have a chart for men or males, and on the right you have a chart for females. And if you look closely, and you can see on the left side of each one the rate per 100,000 and the rates where they are. So in terms of females, if for the most part it doesn't exceed 200 per 100,000 in regard to death rates. For black men, 350,000 to 250,000 per 100,000. So again, if we're talking about black andromortality, we're talking about another area where black men die to a greater extent than others. Could it be stress, diet, health, work? I think it's all of that, and likely other areas. Again, I fully admit this is not my primary area of research, but I would argue that the quality of life and the difficulty and stress deals with that. And of course, there is data that we've covered that shows that with higher mortality rates, alongside more stringent blockages at opportunities, we see black men dying more. There's also other studies that point out that stress rates tend to be higher in terms of navigating racism for black men. Black men report navigating, fighting against racism to greater degrees and having the impact on their quality of life. So here, cancer, heart disease, what are we looking at? All right. Let me see here. So in regard to, let's see, so we got prostate cancer, and if you can't see it, it says African American men are more likely to develop prostate cancer compared to Caucasian men and are nearly 2.5 times as likely to die from the disease. Seen above, cancer rates are even much higher in black men than in black women. Although scientists do not yet understand why prostate cancer incidence and death rates are higher among African American men, it is widely believed that it is a combination of genetic differences, lifestyle, nutritional habits, and medical care may all play a role in the statistics. So lack of access to medical care, lifestyle, say nutritional habits, but I go to lifestyle because I think that's important. It's a bit of a deflective term. A lifestyle, just, what does that mean? Well, when I was talking about men working themselves to death, that's lifestyle. The social expectation to provide and protect fall on the shoulders of men who are coming out of the same Jim Crow that the rest of the community is coming out of the same type of historical economic segregation as every other part of the black community as far as here in America. And yet these men are killing themselves to push it over while we talk about how they don't try hard enough. Word. They don't try hard enough. How many generations of black men work themselves to death? You know how disrespectful it is for people to say shit like that? knowing full well how many of your own families had men work themselves to death. I've even seen professors, black professors, in the last 15 years that died in their damn offices working. Didn't retire when they were supposed to, working. Some of which because it had to do with supporting their families, some of it having to do with the fact that they were dedicated to doing work that uplifted the black community. Either way, lifestyle. And they worked themselves to damn death, only for us to come on YouTube and hear people say black men don't work hard enough. And sometimes hear black men themselves say it. I've even had some condemn me for pointing out the actual income rates of black men because by presenting it, I'm told, it might dissuade black men from working as hard as they need to. Really? So little old me talking about the income rates of black men is going to prevent them from working harder, even though black men... Anyway, all right. So, let's look at the next area. Selective service. It's not really about selective service itself. I really put this up as a reminder for me. This actually has more to do with military service in general. Let me see. I think... Oh, no, I didn't include it. I thought I did. So this is really not about selective service. This is really more about military service. And when you look at the history of warfare, particularly in North America, and you look at the contributions of black men, small population, not often allowed to serve, but in many instances, when you talk about black deaths in regard to war, you're primarily, historically speaking, talking about black men. Right? So if we're going to put this in the context of warfare, and you're going to look at black deaths, you're mainly talking about men. Military service, frontline, infantry work, you're talking about black men. Women, for the most part, tend to join the military and go into officer status, but you often find black men on the front lines. So again, it's not really about selective service per se, although selective service plays its role. There have been recent debates back and forth and some policies put forth that suggest that they're going to have women called in for selective service as well. But pretty consistently, we've seen that it tends to be males that have been required by law to register within 30 days of their 18th birthday for selective service. So if there is a draft, males are the ones to go. And again, we talk about that in a black context. Yeah, we're talking about black male death. Okay. Let me see here. Okay. All right. Moving ahead. This is one that came out a couple of years ago from the Malcolm X grassroots movement, and it had to do with the kind of breakdown of police homicide, not just brutality. It really had to do with police homicide. And basically what we found was on an annual basis, anywhere from 9 to 13. This was actually higher in 2015. It was about up to 20 black women. I think it was the 2015 year. 20 black women had died. A good number of them, died in car chases. But on average now, it's about 9 to 13 black women per year, and about 200 to 300 black men per year that die at the hands of the police. So when we talk about, yet again, in regard to the area of police homicide, and we look at black death, we can talk about andromortality, the deaths of black men. Even statistically against every other community, save Native Americans, you're still talking percentage-wise about majority black male deaths. Yeah. Okay. Now, incarceration. Right? This is a chart we're looking at. Came out in 2014, dealing with U.S. imprisonment rates per 100,000, age, race, and sex. Overwhelmingly, we're talking about 30 to 34-year-old males. Now, the little bars on the right are females. The bars on the left are males. Now, I'm not just talking about incarceration. I'm talking about the really carceral homicide. In other words, we're looking at the deaths of those who are imprisoned. Violent deaths, natural causes. At the end of the day, because the overwhelming population that have been incarcerated in this country are male, and the United States incarcerates more of its own citizens than any other country in the world, statistically, black males find themselves to be the dominant population, even though I think we're only like 5% of the total country, but statistically, we dominate. So when you ask the question, who dies the most? Well, logically, you can see. And this blue line here, on each of these different bars, these different lines, the blue line are black males. These are black males. Yeah. Let's look at it in more detail. This came out this year, 2021. Number of state prisoner fatalities in the U.S. in 2018 by race or Hispanic origin. Now, you see white on the left. Now, they don't actually disaggregate for gender, but I think it's safe to say after the last chart we looked at it, it's overwhelmingly male. And the second highest number on this chart are black. But they're dealing with really raw numbers, raw fatality numbers. Appreciate that, Jay Akbar, for the Cash App. Thank you for supporting. Shout out to Crispus as well. Much appreciation. I didn't call you out before. Thank you for that. But they're dealing with raw numbers. And raw numbers can sometimes be deceptive if you don't know how to also qualify for the rate. So again, if you look at the population size in America, black men constitute about 5% of the country. And yet, when you talk about incarceration, second highest to white men. Yeah. And this is only dealing with state prisoners. We could look at, different levels of it, from jails to prisons. But I thought it important just to at least be able to leave enough for us to just kind of take this in, because we're covering different areas. This is obviously not limited to incarceration. Homelessness. This is a slide that I show in my class. This was from data pulled from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration in 2011. One of the publications that came out at that time. And basically, it argued that 90% of the homeless in the U.S. Were men. And according to a 1999 study at the Urban Institute, 40% of them are black men. And that was before the recession. So in cities like New York and Philadelphia, you actually had over 90% out of the black population that were black male who constituted the homeless. Appreciate the support, Major Payne. Thank you. But why am I talking about homelessness and mortality? Well, I think you obviously know. Those that are more than likely to experience a death that isn't even acknowledged tend to be homeless. And at the current moment, we're seeing homelessness rates that are ridiculous. Appreciate that, DJ Twice. Yeah. We were talking about tent cities before 2020. And the COVID economy has produced a mass increase in homelessness. And this is before the whole question of the moratorium really became a national issue. Now they're trying to extend it, but let's be real. You start talking about black and brown folk who are being kicked out, particularly if they're poor. Appreciate the support, Cameron. Landlords don't have to wait for a moratorium. The poor people can't afford to sue you anyway. And I've been hearing about, black folk being pushed out since last summer. LA, Long Beach, just come home, stuff on the front lawn. What you gonna do? You were unemployed before the COVID economy hit. Who you suing? Right? But you also have mom and pops who own property. One house they live in, something else they're renting out, and they're trying to pay mortgages. And appreciate the PayPal, Anthony. I didn't thank you already. And they're grappling with that. So it's just not easy across the board. Also appreciate the PayPal from One Love. Thank you for that. Right. So that being said, Red Sing the Blues, I appreciate that. It's not really about homelessness per se. It's about death in regard to that homelessness. That was a whole nother conversation when we start talking about COVID, because at the end of the day, nobody really could quantify how many black men were dying, mainly because they weren't being counted or acknowledged anyway, especially, by the time they were homeless. A lot of that had to do with incarceration, right? We talk about this all the time on my show. You got black men that get out of prison, even if they have housing vouchers, nobody rents to them. There was even a brother a couple months ago in the comments who said, you're right. He said, I'm actually the one that decides who to rent to, and I routinely have black males with housing vouchers come in and I won't rent to them. And, hey, I'm sure he has his reasons and whatnot. I'm not really critiquing him, but what I am saying is that it is difficult to quantify death rates among the homeless, even before 2020. Not always easy to do. Homeless populations can sometimes be mobile, difficult to quantify, living in different places, sometimes on a daily basis, not easy to keep up with. But when you factor in black male incarceration, many of these brothers find themselves, when they get out, on the streets. And this is one of the major contributing factors to why black male homelessness is not only worse than other racial groups of homelessness, but even worse than black female homelessness. And the other part of it, I think, is also fairly cultural. I mean, our ideas about men being self-sustaining play a role, right? Maurice, appreciate that Cash App support. Jay, thank you for the support. Yeah. We have an assumption that men should be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And we aggressively push that, even amongst black men. Black men don't have a whole lot of empathy for other black men. I posted earlier today about the young brother. Y'all know his name more than I do, because I don't really follow sports a lot. But the young brother who got with, I think her name is Brittany Renner or something. Ended up having to pay $200,000 a month. She divorced him as soon as she got pregnant. Like, that wasn't a predatory move. Even amongst black men, there was very little empathy. Most of the black men began to write in about how dumb he was, how stupid he was, how he didn't see it coming, whatever. I'm not going to eat your lunch about it. That's what you believe. That's what you believe. One of the things I'm just acknowledging is how black men don't have much empathy for each other. See, that's the interesting thing. When people say, well, you guys just make... Joe Herb, thank you for the support. You guys just, make excuses for each other. I'm like, black men are the first ones to talk shit about other black men. His woman could shoot him in the head, and black men will be the first one to say he must have did something, and followed by black feminists who say he definitely must have did something. That's interesting. But I'm not actually passing judgment on whether or not he did anything. I'm just acknowledging the deaths. And I'm starting to look at these different areas of death and asking the question, what does it mean if we see the same thing in different areas? Do we take stock on it differently, or do we keep treating each situation on an individual basis and decide what to empathize on based on the individual story? Well, I didn't see it in the news, so it's not important. Well, I did see this one in the news and it involves a celebrity, so it's kind of important. When do we step back and actually look at black male death across different areas? And if we're finding that black men are dying to a higher degree in each area, maybe we need to change the nature of how we talk about death. Maybe instead of blaming black men or dismissing them or accusing black men of being crybabies or complaining, we actually talk about why black male quality of life is different. Most of the time I hear the conversation limited to the individual black male and what he didn't do well enough, but we don't talk about the structural issue. And that's one of the reasons that when you step back and you look at this from a, kind of a macro kind of framework, where you're looking at black death across the board, at some point, individual, anecdotal, judgmental tones do not explain the severely increased loss of life across different areas. So far tonight, we've talked about life expectancy, we've talked about cancer, heart disease, incarceration, homelessness, all in regard to death. And the reason I'm putting it in this context is too much of the time I hear the discussion only in terms of individual cases. And we go out our way to shame Black men, even the dead, because he must have done something wrong. We tend to have this chest thumping alpha approach to life. And if we didn't overcome, it's because we were too weak. No. Let's look at another area though. Let's see. Now this has to do with new HIV diagnoses in the US and dependent areas for the most affected subpopulations, 2017, right? New diagnoses of HIV. What do we see? Well, starting from the bottom, we have white women and heterosexual contact, lowest numbers. And the green obviously lets us know we're talking about women. Hispanic, Latino women just above them, right? Heterosexual contact. Black men, heterosexual contact just above Latino women. Black women, heterosexual contact just above them, or not just, but significantly above heterosexual Black men. Then you have white male-to-male sexual contact, Hispanic male-to-male sexual contact, and what do we have at the top? Black male-to-male sexual contact, blowing everybody out of the water in terms of HIV. Now, granted, I come out of a time period where just getting HIV was considered a death sentence. And today it's not quite as aggressive as it was. There's new medications, new approaches, so on and so forth. People are living longer than they were in the late 80s and early 90s. At that time, again, you were considered, if HIV positive, it was pretty much considered a wrap. I mean, Magic Johnson kind of, was the first one we saw that was positive that managed to stay alive, and obviously he still is. But at that time, it was damn near a death sentence. So I'm not necessarily saying that all these men are dead or will die, but I am saying the fact that they are being diagnosed at such high degrees tells you they're in the most danger in regard to HIV-caused deaths. Now, the reason it says male-to-male sexual contact is some of these men don't necessarily regard themselves to be gay or bi or even trans. Some regard themselves as heterosexual. I'm not going to get into, whether I'm not going to judge that. What I'm simply pointing out is areas of lethal vulnerability for Black men. I had a number of years ago, I was supposed to go to this American Association for Men conference, I think it was called. It was my first time going. And I was supposed to go with two other scholars. And they both stood me up. So I was there by myself. Whatever. I'd never been to this particular conference, didn't know anybody there. And, I attended the sessions. And there's a point toward the end of the conference where if you've never been to an academic conference, they'll have a lot of the time, they'll have these poster presentations, usually like in a hallway area, right? And usually it'll be like students, grad students who are presenting, like doing mini presentations. So as you're walking through the hall, they will literally give you a presentation on the spot. Or if there are enough people there, you kind of walk in and listen to the presentation. It's usually only a few minutes, and then you go on to the next one. So this is probably about 15 people with little posters on stands, and they're giving these mini presentations. And I run up on a brother. He was the only brother there at the end of the hall. And not too many people were really listening to him. So he was just kind of sitting there staring off into nothing because nobody would really approach him to let him present. This is an opportunity usually for students to sharpen their skills and their knowledge. They're engaging the public, they're presenting. So it's a learning opportunity for the people listening and as well as the graduate students who are presenting. So me, I'm going straight to him. Ain't no way I'm just going to leave a brother sitting in there by himself and everybody else is presenting and talking over information. And this guy's just sitting there by himself. Like nobody wanted to be bothered. And I'd seen him present earlier. He was a gay brother. He identified as such in his presentation the day before. So I walked up to him and, he shook hands and said hello. He told me his name and I let him do his spiel. And he did a good job. He was a good grad student. I think he was a master's student in gender studies somewhere in Florida, I think it was. And so I started to ask him questions about his program and, He's primarily taught by feminists. There were no men in the gender studies department he was in. I think he was a doctoral student at the time. This might have been 2014 or so. And he was doing his presentation on HIV. But it was interesting. His presentation was on Black women and their vulnerability to HIV. Nothing wrong with that. That was his research area at the time. Did a good job breaking it down. But after he was done, I said, man, that was a good job. I gave him some tips on how he could present better and what kind of information he could include. But he did a good job. I said, let me ask you a question. I said, you identified yourself as gay yesterday in your presentation, correct? He said, yeah. I said, are you familiar at all with the rates of HIV diagnoses for gay Black men? He said, no. I said, why not? He said, well, that hasn't been what my professors have told me to study. I said, I'm just curious. You're in women and gender studies? He said, yeah. I said, okay, gender studies. I said, do you have any male professors? He said, no. I said, how many other male students, grad students, are there in your cohort? He said, we don't have any. I'm the only one. Okay. And you don't know anything about the males? He said, no. I said, okay. So I pulled out my laptop and I showed him. It wasn't this chart. It was another, but it was similar. He started crying. He wasn't crying because of the threat immediately to himself, as we talked about it. He was crying because nobody fucking told him that the demographic that he identifies with was most vulnerable. Here he is, a doctoral student, dealing with Black gender, a gay brother, talking about HIV rates in regard to heterosexual women. Now, look at this chart again. Where do you find Black heterosexual women? That was his presentation. And there would have been nothing wrong with that had he also been introduced to the issues that pertain to his own demographic, but he wasn't. It wasn't part of his formal training. They completely sidestepped it. And he was part of the most vulnerable group. So again, we're talking about Black andromortality. We're talking about Black male death in regard to, in this context, HIV, still a significant issue. And even the brothers most vulnerable to it aren't often trained about it. Now, this is, and I apologize, it's going to be, I'll see if I can enlarge it. Maybe that'll make it a little easier for you guys to see, right? 190 watching. Please like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel. Appreciate that if you could. But this is the top leading causes of death in 2019. It's actually, this is from 1999 to 2019. So it's a 20-year chart. And it is covering death, the top 10 causes of death for that 20-year period. Right? And at different ages, you can see the breakdown. I usually pull these up every year. I don't think I've done it. I don't think I've looked at it for this year. I didn't have time to today. That was okay, because I was talking about death in general, so it didn't have to necessarily be for today. But I thought the last 20 years is a good enough sampling, right? So what you can see is, as of 2 years ago, Black men actually broke through and had the highest rates of heart disease in the Black community, as of 2 years ago. Prior to that, Black men were dying, in regard to other things to a greater degree. But heart disease, cancer, those are the top things on the list at this point. There's actually an article I ran into yesterday that said that COVID is the third leading cause of death, but those numbers do not supersede the top numbers here, except maybe septicemia. But anyway, so heart disease, cancer, and when you talk about unintentional injury, that can include workplace injuries as well. And all of this is, that which is leading to death. So if you look at the column on the far right that says all ages, you can see what the leading causes of death are for all ages. heart disease, cancer, unintentional injury, cerebral vascular disease, homicide. I can tell you, you're not going to find homicide in the top 5 causes of death for any other demographic, really, for Black men. Right? Diabetes, chronic low respiratory disease, right? Nephritis, HIV, there we go, and septicemia. Now, if you look more in the center part of the chart at the green squares from age 10 to 44, you see suicide. At age 10 to 14, suicide is the 4th leading cause of death. Age 15 to 24, it's the 3rd. Goes down again to the 4th place from age 25 to 34, and then goes down to the 6th place from 35 to 44. Now, even though it's not still on the list, because these are the top 10 causes of death, we do know that among the 65-year plus age group, when you compare suicides, Black men are committing it at much higher rates, right? But it just doesn't make the top 10 list because there are more people dying of other issues here, right? So what I'm saying is, in each of these areas, especially when you measure it against population size, this conversation about Black male death, which is fundamentally a masculinist analysis of death that covers various areas where Black men are dying to a greater degree, what we find is that there's ample information. There's ample amounts of information that allow us to really have a critical dialogue about Black death. Appreciate the support, Mars. Thank you. There's ample data to give us a sense of what Black men are grappling with, meaning that you can actually have just a discourse unto itself about Black men and death. And that's really one of the things I'm putting on the table here. To just have a conversation about Black male death across different areas. There's enough information to warrant us doing that very thing. Yeah. There's enough. But again, we tend to jump right back into, finding new ways to just blame and dismiss and individual anecdotes. I'm not interested in any of that. What I'm interested in is a broader analysis of what do these deaths mean across context. Across context, what does it mean? What is it saying about the quality of Black male life and what needs to happen? And like it or not, there needs to be institutional intervention. Because here's the thing, every group that is not doing as bad has institutional intervention. Much as we want to blame it on laziness and whatever else, in whatever dismissive way we want to approach Black male death, there's institutional intervention that operates on behalf of other groups. Yeah. We don't talk about it enough. And it needs to be discussed. Now, this is just a smattering. This is a smattering. This is really, obviously I'm not doing a formal academic presentation. I tried to include slides where you should be able to see the citations. I apologize to the extent that you may not have been able to. This last slide here is from the Whiskers database produced by the National Center for Injury Prevention and Control for the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention. So it's coming out of CDC data. And, for the most part, it has to do with getting as accurate as we can. And I'm not interested in blaming anybody for these deaths. I'm not going to say, such and such is responsible. What I'm saying is, how do we make sense of and what can we do to change the environment that produces higher levels of mortality, more so for Black men and boys, depending on the context, than any other group? What do we do? How do we have that conversation? especially if there are so few articles or news reports or documentaries or films or television shows or even YouTube videos that are willing to take up the subject specifically. What I'm trying to do here by offering Black Andromortality as a concept is give you the theoretical platform to leverage and rationalize having this discussion. Because as soon as you start talking about death, people want to jump in and include other demographics and, kind of excuse away or bait and switch the conversation away from Black males. No, that's why I called it Andromortality. We are specifically talking about Black male death. Not going to change the subject. Not going to deflect. Not going to use it as an opportunity to create policy for another demographic. If you're using this concept, be it in the classroom or in the halls of Congress, you are unapologetically talking about Black male quality of life and mortality. Those two subjects are linked. Yeah. So that being said, see what time we're looking at here. 6. Okay. At it a little. We're coming up on an hour and a half. I might do. Let me see. I might put a link out there. All I can ask for those coming in is to be respectful. And remember that we are talking about Black males as a collective. We'll put the link in the chat. Bring a few people up. I'm not doing a 3, 4, well, I should say a 4 or 5 hour stream. That's not necessarily how I roll, but just a little bit of conversation. Because at the end of the day, I don't have a lot of people have these conversations with, and it's one of the reasons I came to YouTube. Because, damn it, what happened to the thing? Okay, there it is. So that's one of the reasons I came to YouTube, because there's certain conversations that I wanted to have that couldn't have too many other places. And I've been able to connect with a loose-knit group of brothers here and there across the country, hell, and across the world, that I've been able to have some of these discussions with. And I'm very thankful for that, because there's not a lot of conversation elsewhere for that. So I dropped the link in the chat. At least I think I did. Yeah, there it is. And if you're interested in coming on, you may do so. And we can talk a little bit about Black male death. Let's see here. Okay. All right. Get my brother Ian up here. What's up, man?
Peace, God. How you doing?
Well, I can't hear.
Can you hear me?
I can't hear you. You guys let me know if you can hear him, and I can't. Maybe I've set something up wrong, but I can't hear you, Ian.
Well, can anyone else hear me?
Anybody else? Let me know if anybody else can hear Ian.
Can anyone hear me? Oh, they say they can.
Oh,
hear
you guys can hear both. I can't hear him at all. Okay. I don't know what's going on. Damn, y'all can hear him. I can't hear him. I don't know why.
Oh.
Let me check something. Hold on. My apologies, Ian. It might be my system. Let me check something. There we go. I think I found the problem. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that was me. Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you. And I appreciate you guys in the chat for letting me know. I didn't, Hey, so how you doing, man?
I'm good. Good to hear from you.
I just need to ask, man, have I just been talking for an hour and a half and nobody can hear me at all?
No, everyone can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Because y'all wouldn't even tell me. Y'all just be laughing. Like, he think he talking. What's going on with you, man?
Nothing much, man. Just enjoying life, man. Good show. Great topic. What made you pick this topic for this evening?
Well, I was saying that more at the beginning. I reviewed a couple days ago a Harvard report on COVID deaths, and it was coming out of this gender psi lab, and they acknowledged Black men, but just kind of quickly shifted. And I noticed when I saw that, I said, well, let me just look it up. And I tried to look up Black male deaths, and I didn't find a whole lot of articles. And
Mm-hmm.
then I decided, well, let me step out of COVID, and just and what I found was, in so many different areas, Black men tend to find themselves dying to greater degrees than other demographics.
Mm-hmm.
And even though you could find a report here and there,
Mm-hmm.
very rarely found any kind of connecting discussion about those deaths in general. And you got to go to Tommy Curry to find that. You can go look at the Man Not, and you can
Mm-hmm.
definitely see him engaging that conversation. But I think there needs to be a lot more of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely so. Definitely so. Yeah.
Uh, so yeah. So as far as Black male deaths, does anything come to mind for you when you think about
Well, as far as black male deaths, I think that in a lot of cases, I guess, and I want to I want to mention Force Windu,
that?
black male
Yeah.
suicide.
Yeah.
I think that's important to look at and look at the pressures that we live under day to day. That's different from everyone else. That we're not really able to focus on and tackle.
Hmm. Hmm. Definitely. Definitely. Um, it's come up in different forms over the years. I mean, you and I have had conversations offline about, um, especially post 2015, the death of Black men, and how that's been used politically, um, to benefit everyone but Black men.
Hmm.
What I think I'm starting to find is that's a conversation we can have across a number of different areas. Because when you go back to this Harvard report,
Hmm.
see, here's the thing: I don't care, whether or not we don't have to be. People don't have to be on the same. You don't have to agree about COVID or whatever. Understand the political purpose of this paper. This
Okay.
is an academic paper. It's not done just to be done. There's a political purpose behind it. The reason you can find this paper across 7 or 8 different sites, if you Google it, is because it's really a push for policy resources, right?
Hmm.
That are targeted at a vulnerable group that's highlighted in the study,
Right.
which is, clearly Black women. Again, and I'm fine with that. I'm not saying there shouldn't be reports about Black women, but it explains why they can acknowledge that Black men actually have higher death rates and still just shift this discussion and keep it on Black women. The reason they can do it is because they're pushing for resources.
Right.
They're pushing for policy. And
Hmm.
this is one of the Achilles heels for Black men in this society. I argue, and a lot of the things I talk about, pretty much everything I'm talking about, is policy driven. All the issues that I point to with Black men
Right.
are pushed by policy.
Yes.
And I've heard people say, well, you don't talk about the white man enough. No, when I say policy, that's the white man. That's white society. That's
Hmm.
supremacy. That's it. But I'm specifically identifying policy because that's how powerful it is. And we see policies on voting dockets every year, but we really in many ways underestimate the impact of policy. So when you look at a paper like this, I want people to actually see policy.
Right. Right.
You might
So.
you might actually have a nonprofit office that's funded. It might be a new bill that's passed. And again, I'm not upset that it might be resources going to Black women. I'm upset that Black men can be danced around in this study as well as in society when they clearly have the greatest need.
Well, all of this is connected. All of the issues that you bring up, they're all connected.
Hmm.
My thing is, how long do you think we have before we can actually um, get some policy, in a major way, put forth for us, because I think that the world is changing, the country is changing,
Mm-hmm.
and I think at some point, they're going to stop giving out, as freely as they once did before.
Mm-hmm. True. I definitely think that's happening. So if nothing else, by putting the information up here, the question is also being posed to brothers. Like, all right, I think policy is important, but if policy can't be pushed or if policy can't be passed, what else can be done? Well, first it has to start with knowing that this is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that this is an issue that is verified and documented. It's not just something a couple of people got up and they're mad about. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like this is documented, right? And if it's documented and we can prove that it's existing, that it exists, and we can prove that Black males are a more vulnerable population than others, then yeah, we can also ask the question, what are we going to do about it? But usually that has to start with us acknowledging that this is a documented issue.
Yes, yeah, and that's why we have to keep pushing for Black male empowerment, because there's a mental block where empowerment, and even from our own sisters, empowerment is not something that they want for Black men. So they're going to continue to ignore a lot of these numbers and a lot of these warning signs as to our death and to our mental health and status,
Mm-hmm.
in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Absolutely.
think a lot of the work is gonna just continue in pushing for Black male empowerment, and hopefully, as we keep pushing for Black male empowerment, be like, oh, okay, you need this, you need that. But I don't think that we've completely broken through to say, hey, Black male empowerment is something that we are taking serious, and we're not going to back down from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm gonna bring in another.
As
Oh,
pushing for
oh,
Black
hello.
male empowerment,
Jughead.
like, oh, okay, you need
Can
this,
you,
you need that.
Jughead?
But
Can you hear it?
I don't think that we've completely broken through. I think
Yes,
he
sir.
had
I'm
to
coming
say,
through.
hey, Black male
Yeah, but you got to
empowerment
block
is
you got
something
your
that
sound in the background.
we are taking serious, and
You
we're
got to
not
mute
going
the
to
show.
back
So
down
let
from.
me mute myself. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Okay. I think that's better. How you doing?
As pushing for Black
Uh-oh.
male
It's still going.
empowerment.
Can you mute it?
Okay, you need this. Turn off your YouTube.
Turn off YouTube.
Yes, sir. Let me mute my show. Am I coming through clear?
Well, we can hear the background. You got to turn off YouTube.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna take you down until you get that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sorry about that. Let's bring another brother. Is this Pers? Hello? Pers? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I think we can hear you. You're up here with Ian and myself. What's going on?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Well, I got the YouTube in the background and it's kind of delayed. Or can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. So hey, how's it going, Dr. T?
It's going well. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing really well. I'm 25-year-old. I'm a young brother. I live in Virginia. This is actually my first time actually getting on YouTube to actually speak. It's one of my favorite content creators actually. So just to give you a little background on myself, I like Dr. Curry. I follow you. I follow O'Shea. I follow Mr. Samuels. I kind of follow all you guys and support all of you guys.
Have you had a chance to read The Man Not?
No, I have not actually.
Yeah, pick up Dr. Tommy Curry's book, The Man Not. Definitely pick that up.
All right, will do. I'll do that. So you brought up a very interesting topic tonight. On the topic of the leading causes of Black male death. Mm-hmm. And looking at that chart, it was actually pretty scary that between the ages of, 15 to 34, the homicide was the leading, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is the number one leading cause of Black male death, correct?
Yeah.
I'm looking at that chart. And then after that is heart disease.
Hmm.
That's that's uh, that's pretty scary
Yeah.
because that I might fall into that category of the heart disease um, category, honestly. But I've been to the doctor a few times, but they always say I'm 100% healthy and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But I suspect that there may be like an underlying issue that can't be detected by the doctors. But
Okay.
so I mean that's a very real possibility for me though. So I'm in the chat. I'm asking questions about. Do you have anything or any kind of recommended lifestyle for people who can actually maybe, I don't know, counter that, or how can I say it? Kind of
You mean in terms of
that's not
living,
happen.
talking about in terms of living a better quality health lifestyle? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that won't lead up to necessarily death due to heart attacks due to heart disease.
I'd be
You know,
surprised if they didn't give you suggestions. I wouldn't prescribe to tell you what to do as far as that. And besides, I think there might be legal ramifications to such things I don't know about.
right. Of course, yeah. You're right.
I said to do this, and then you die, and then it's my fault.
Yeah. Right. That's a good point. That's a good point. Okay, let me ask you a question. So, what do you think? What do you think the cause of it is, though? Why do you think so many of us have this underlying? Do you really think it's just due just to like lack of exercise, poor dieting, and
No, I
you really think
I,
that's the issue?
I think black men don't value themselves enough. Everybody else takes care of themselves. Black men don't go to the doctor as much. They don't eat as well. They overwork themselves. They live risky lifestyles. They don't value themselves enough, where other men do. I think we're taught not to value ourselves.
well, I think we're taught not to value ourselves, but I also go to Jim Sedanius's work. James Sedanius, when he's talking about really the quality of life for black males, and he's dealing with any population that attempts to dominate another targets its men, and I don't think it's coincidental or accidental that black men are in the position that they're in. So I think that's why I tend to look at the structural issues, because I think they link these categories, because we're tempted to limit this to laziness, to whatever, and we individualize and blame black men. But when you start to step
Yeah.
back, I said earlier, and you look at the tapestry of black male death across context, this is bigger than the kind of dismissive kind of answers we like to give. There's something going on that connects each of these areas that moves beyond laziness, or you know what I mean. It's bigger than that. It's structural in that regard. So I'm just putting it on the table to begin a discussion.
Well, BGS, I want to ask you. So, with you, how were you able to, find balance, at a certain point, to say, I balance, I'm balancing valuing myself, and being productive at the same time. Because I know in the era that you grew up,
Hmm.
of course, you had to do a lot of competition, especially to compete with white folks and so on to
Yeah.
being successful. So what brought you? Because you didn't have the manosphere back then. So what brought you to that balancing act?
You have to be willing to be independent, and that's hard for any person to do, especially black men. Um, and you got to be willing to go against the grain, because you're going to get shamed by the folks around you. You're going to get shamed by your women, and so you got to be willing to
Hmm.
put yourself first. And you're going to get called selfish. You're going to be called distant, dismissive, whatever the thing is. Um, you got to Roller Tomasi says, you got to be the your point of your own origin. In other words, you got to make yourself the center of the universe, and and everything else will flow out from there. And we're not taught to do that. We're taught to sacrifice ourselves for the family, for the women, for whatever. Right? There's a reason that Grandpa worked two jobs to put Mama in the house, and everybody else would come over to, and he became the so-called patriarch of the family, where he was always the bank. He was always the the go-to. He's always the one that would fix cars and stuff like that because he was in service to everybody else instead of being in service to himself first.
Yeah.
And that and women, that's what women get upset about, is because a lot of men now are not willing to, go out on their shield.
Yeah, it's definitely, black men are definitely asking different questions. Shout out to Dr. Wilson for becoming a new member. Jughead, let's see if we can hear you now.
Yes, sir. Hello from London. Greetings, people.
Hey, greetings. That sounds a lot better. How you doing, man?
I'm fine. Thank you, brother. Greetings to you from London, brother. BGS, Ian Greaves,
Yes.
Piers, and greetings to all of you from London, UK. The first time into your broadcast. Yeah, and it's a great topic, a very important topic, I feel, as a black man myself. Very important topic.
Oh, I appreciate you coming in. Are you seeing similar things or different things there?
Similar in the UK, I'm afraid. Similar for all the wrong reasons. The high abortion rates, for instance, are off the charts. The lack of respect for some of our women, also, I see over here in the UK. The parallels are similar to yours in the US.
Okay.
And I think the same underlying reasons, I think, as well. Lack of respect for black manhood, black male authority, black patriarchy, I think. That's an underlying disrespect for both sides of the Atlantic.
Okay. Interesting. Any questions about this? Any that anybody has, really? Because again, this is a concept that I'm developing. So go ahead.
Can I think of an idea? Excuse me if you heard that.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you.
Okay. Brother O'Shea Duke Jackson, he actually brought up a concept on his King Ghana channel. He just brought it up not too long ago, but I never actually thought about this. He said to have the skill of conflict resolution between black men could possibly be a very valuable skill. Like I said, I'm 25, but it amazes me how many times, like let's say brother on brother, like let's say you're just walking through a store and you kind of bump a brother. You know what I mean? But it surprises me how little things like that easily upset us, and it can easily escalate to violence, maybe even death.
Well, this is something, if you look to Dr. Curry's work, he talks about this a lot in terms of the impact of the environment. And one of the things he points out empirically, that you see an escalation of violence, intimate partner violence, homicide, so on and so forth, especially in regard to poverty. You know what I mean? So he talks about these things in that regard. But in the black community, I would agree, there's definitely, especially amongst the men, a situation where there's increased hostilities and tensions around that. But we it's useful to look at it in terms of environment. What we tend to do is individualize the problem, and we just make it about each individual situation. And I'm not saying that doesn't have a value. It's just, it's a limited approach that doesn't begin to really kind of explain all these different contexts of death that we're talking about.
Well, that goes into that. When I don't know if you guys, it went viral where they were trying to crucify the young guy because he had shot some fireworks at his girlfriend. And then she tried to raise someone else tried to raise, Paris Milan tried to raise a GoFundMe for the girl and tried to make it, this thing of the abusive black man. But in fact, she went along with Paris and took the money, but understood, she did a live with a friend and really was just saying that's just what they do because the social economic status that they're in, in the hood and so on and so forth, they find it fun, to be like really aggressive, even male to female and female to male. So then, you have to factor that in. So if the females and the males are aggressive, and laugh it off, that they almost are killing each other for fun, you have to think, what the males are doing to each other.
Klingons will be Klingons.
Oh, I didn't. I heard two people at the same time. What were you saying?
I said Klingons will be Klingons.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
Go
ahead.
Dr. Hassan, I know you have a few videos about what do you call it when the women are responsible for the man's death too? What is that term that you use for it?
You said what?
When women are responsible for the man's death, what do you call that? What term did you
You talking about murder?
No, like when they like. So I know you have a few videos talking about how the black men also died due to what is it called when the
Proxy
women.
violence.
Oh,
Yes, that's what it is.
so
Proxy violence.
you're talking about proxy homicide. Yeah.
Yes, I didn't see something actually happened to me in real life where that actually now resonates with me. A brother I used to work with had a girl. Long story short, she very aggressive, and then she how some women get extremely confrontational with anybody and they feel like they can do anything, but they always say they'll get their man to handle some type of business. Well, a brother was actually killed because of that, but you see, because I actually saw it in real life, it actually now I understand what you mean when that proxy violence thing is extremely serious. Like they act in a certain way, and then they'll just get, hey, I'll get Jerome here on you, and then now either he dies or he go kill somebody else.
Right.
It's really crazy.
Well, sometimes it's out of a genuine need for protection. Like, if my sister calls me and tells me someone's harassing me, she's somebody that I could believe if, but there are other situations. This is why when I did the Daily Show, I actually played a video by a woman who was talking from her experience. And she was talking about dealing with other women who were abusing this protection from men to exact revenge on others to the point of death. Right. So we go from proxy violence to proxy homicide. And when and here's the thing. It's usually something that's, when a man is asked to come in and be violent on behalf of a woman, it's usually to another man. Right. So if he dies and the gentleman who attacked him goes to jail, statistically, all you see is one male who killed another and one male who went to jail. And so, her role in this becomes it's actually pretty difficult to involve a woman legally, and unless you can find evidence, and there's been a few cases, and I've reported on them in the last year, where you can find texts back and forth where she kind of orchestrated this, but unless you have that, it can be really difficult to hold women accountable who are initiating proxy homicide, because they don't seem to be a part of it. You know what I mean? And that might be a whole other area of this discussion, right? Because if we were to talk about proxy homicide as its own area, is it more likely that men are calling women to kill other women on their behalf? Is it men calling other men, women calling other women, or women calling on men? See, those are questions we can ask.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I have a definitive answer. I'm saying it's a question we can ask that what we can verify. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Well, go ahead. There was
go, brother.
Okay, go ahead, Ian.
There was just another tweet that went viral on Twitter where a female said, what she just is not, she's not going to just set up a female to get jumped. She says she's going to set up another female. This is a black female. She wants to set up females to get raped and murdered.
Wow. Well, and I would say to also be careful. And this is something BGS and I talk about a lot in terms of the economic environment we're moving more and more into every day, as the desperation increases, right? The threat increases. I don't know if BGS wants to weigh in on that, but that in terms of people getting set up, that's something we can plan to see more of.
Oh yeah. It's as women become more predatory, you're probably gonna start seeing a lot of this. And people are snapping because societies can't go through this speed of change without some kind of severe anxiety. And black women are really vulnerable to that kind of anxiety. You see them, man, they're going crazy, trying to run over their boyfriends with cars, trying to, shooting their husbands. that story that Dr. Johnson put up. I don't know if he's going to do a video on it, but where um, she killed her husband and had and had her kids help cut him up and clean up the mess. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, you're gonna see a lot more of that. Women dumping off their kids, and it's just gonna be, if you go back and look at Charles Dickens and what he wrote back, 200 years ago, man, you're gonna see something similar, just with more people. So black people are just one part of that.
Yeah.
So, like I said, brothers, be careful out there, man, especially with these women. We wanted women to be taken down a notch or two. They've been taken down a notch or two. But the thing is, I always said, you won't like what you see when it happens. So they're gonna come back to the table, but they're gonna have a knife in their a knife hidden behind their back. So be ready.
Okay.
It's just, it's just crazy to think that like I have to actually think about my own mortality based on how people respond to me. That's just a crazy idea to me. Like there has been situations where I had to actually deliberately swallow my pride because there may have been a threat of violence toward myself had I stood up for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's smart.
Yeah,
it is smart. It really is. It's just it's just a crazy idea.
Yeah. Looks like we have Kareen. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yep.
Okay. What's going on?
Good night, everyone. How are you guys doing?
How are you?
Hello.
I'm great. I just came on the panel because you guys are talking about the violence against men and how women are setting up men. And, like even before the pandemic, I don't know if you guys heard about the, I think what's this website, Plenty of Fish, where they were setting up men to get robbed and beat up.
Yeah.
So, even on these dating websites, you guys got to be careful because it's just like on the news, I've seen so many more women are committing violence. I mean, there always been some violence, but lately it's just like you're seeing so many women in Brooklyn. A woman just went up to another woman and shot her in the head. It's just like I feel like I don't know what's going on. Well, I know what's going on, but it's so apparent now. So guys out there, you guys got to be very careful. I mean, before they used to say women got to be careful, call, make sure you get somebody's license plates. Now the guys have to behave the same way because it's crazy out here.
Oh, yeah. I just posted a video of a woman ran into his car and he tried to get out and stop her and she damn near ran him over and drove away. But, you guys know I've posted several videos where men have been run over or involved in some type of vehicular assault or homicide situation. So, she's absolutely right. But I mean, again, it's just the question being posed. If we decide to look at this as an area of death, how then do we, how do we make sense of what we see? Are black men more vulnerable in these situations? And if they are, what do we do about it? What do we make sense of? So it's really just the beginning point of gathering data, gathering information. But what's different about this is I'm trying to gather that information in relation to death in other areas. And that's not quite as frequent as it could be, especially in the academy. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, Gigi, he just did a show recently where he talked about the origins of the domestic violence shelter. And, he discussed where the lady herself said that, she did not count the numbers of the men. That's just something that, they just didn't do. They counted the number of the females, and it looked like it was an overabundance of females, but it was only because the men were not being counted.
Well, yeah, they weren't even being invited. But one of the things they found when they interviewed the women that came in, I keep telling people this was before female victimization was really an understood thing, even by women. So when these women were coming into these abuse shelters, they were being interviewed. They had no problem saying, no, I hit him in the head with a bottle and knocked him out. No, I attacked him with a knife. They because it wasn't a thing yet. So they were just like, yeah, he hit me, I hit him back. That narrative has changed as there's been more of a reward for following into a narrative of just female victimization. But early on when that happened, the stories they got these women were the women running the shelters were blown away because it was like, well, this doesn't fit what we thought. I mean, we thought these would just be, damsels in distress who were being abused. These women were coming in like, no, I needed a place to stay, but I knocked them out with a bat. And here's the bat. You know what I mean? And women were like, oh, shit. This is not what we thought it was. Again, when those reports were generated from those shelters, all that information of violence against men weren't really part of the narrative. So, they weren't included.
Yeah. So so there's a problem because we want to do this without kind of dismantling manhood. You know what I'm saying? Because there's still a stigma of men really not really wanting to, as far as BGS, wanting to, and like you said, look at their health, and even say that they've been victims of females, because we want to keep a certain mental framework of who we are as men in relation.
Well, then nothing will change. Then you're going to have to change it, otherwise nothing's going to change.
But I think it's a spiritual thing. We're going back to what you said.
Well, if it's spiritual, then you have to put up with it. There's one or two things: either you're going to keep the status quo, or you're going to do something to change it. First thing you have to do is change yourself. The biggest problem is men is that black men won't stand up for themselves. Especially if the women don't co-sign it.
Yeah.
Because black men didn't stand up for themselves with My Brother's Keeper. The women couldn't have done that if black men stood up for it.
Yeah.
But we went along with it. We went along
That's
with
a good
what the
point.
women said. And that we still do. BLM wouldn't have been a thing if black men stood up to it. They didn't. They just co-signed it and passed it along. At some point, black men are going to have to stand up for it. The first time we actually did was during the 2020 elections. And guess what happened? We got all kinds of attacks and shaming.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons just real quick, that's one of the reasons I brought up the Harvard study and the article that came out, because I've seen a million of these in my lifetime. And I just, first time I saw it, I was just like, part of me was like, yeah, it's just another study. But I'm starting to really understand the weight of these kind of things and how they lead up to policy in 10 years. And then all of a sudden you see these buildings erected around accomplishing a goal of ending this strike. And it all starts with a study like this that says, these are the groups that are most vulnerable and they need the most help, even though they acknowledge that black men are more worse off. Yeah. They dismiss it and focus on their chosen population.
Yeah. You know how many 10% of your boys between birth and 15 actually die from asthma. Do you hear black women or anybody else having a fundraiser or any kind of awareness of little black boys and asthma?
No.
And why did they die from it, or why they suffer from it? Nobody says anything, because black boys are supposed to suffer in silence.
Nothing. And and that's why I was saying is, we have a short window to put in our bid for this, and I don't think a lot of us understand. Like you said, there's a lag in between putting in the bid and the actual programs being implemented. And if we don't get our bid in soon, I think the time for putting in bids, based on how the world is changing, I think that's going to be coming to an end soon.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is. We keep going. Basically, black women don't even notice about black male death till they get to be like 35, and there's no husbands or mates for them to take care of them. Then they all of a sudden they talk about the lack of men. But the thing is, they didn't notice the first 25, 30 years when black men were just dropping off, bits at a time. That's like one of the biggest reasons. They always blame incarceration for the lack of the numbers of black males, but they count prisoners just like everybody else. So a lot of black males start dying, man, after the age of 5, and nobody talks about it. And the only time black women get concerned about it when there's not enough men to go around.
Yeah.
Well, matter of fact, let me see if I can bring this up. I don't know if I can bring this up on this screen. How do I do that? Because I want to show my screen. There we go. I know this is not something you guys are going to see very easily. That's about the biggest I can make it. But if you look at the top left area, the top left square here, where it says below 1 year old, when you see it say short gestation, trust me when I tell you these numbers, when compared to other demographics, are actually pretty high for Black males who die before they're born and slightly after. That's what that generally refers to. Below to 1 year old. Black men actually die in greater numbers. Even, again, more to our women. The reason I'm comparing it to our women is because, again, when we talk about Black issues, we would think these numbers would be equal. When you see the numbers are radically different, it's no longer just a Black issue. It becomes a Black male issue. And in terms of the mortality rate of male birth, you find that they tend to be pretty high. So, that becomes part of this discussion as well. How do I get this back?
May I come in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just back to what you said, Dr. Hasan, about the mortality rate prior to infants. Look at the abortion rates in here in the UK and the US. I mean, 4 out of 5 babies are killed, or 8 out of 10 males. That says it all. That's not random. Once you get over 50% towards 80, 90, that's deliberate. That's not random. So, and no one talks about that at all. Black Lives Matter. We're not in abortion clinics. That's hypocrisy. If you want to say Black Lives, start there.
Yeah.
Well, they had the article came out that they were selling the body parts, and everything. So,
they were doing that for a while.
Yeah,
they was selling the not the body parts, the what you call it,
the organs.
For the babies.
Mm-hmm.
For the aborted babies, they was using it for experiments and all kind of things. So it's crazy.
Where was this at? Where?
It's in the United States, and this is the United States. It's been an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
There are stories that they've been giving Black women hysterectomies and sewing those uteruses into white women. So there's all kinds of stories about stuff like that.
They've done it to a lot of immigrant Black women. I mean, that was a big thing in the news, and they gave them forced abortions and then deported them. Yeah, it was. I can't put the article because I'm not a mod.
And then using the fetal tissue for experimentation. Yeah.
So it's a lot of craziness and
wow.
I don't know. It's just like a lot of craziness going on in the society, and wow. I mean, I didn't know about the asthma thing. Every time I come on these panels, I learn so much, some more things. I mean, I didn't know about the reading levels. I've never heard of that, and until I came into this space. I've known that was the mortality rates of kids was low, but I've never heard of the asthma rates.
You can thank BGS for that. He's always going to drop in something we don't commonly hear about. So, much appreciation.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna keep it going too much longer, but let me know if anybody has any final thoughts, reflections, or questions before we kind of close it out. I just wanted to kind of put this on the table for people to consider and chew on. And and even in the comment section after the video is done, let me know if I missed anything. Let me know if there's something else you would suggest in how we approach this very idea of Black male death. So any other closing thoughts, reflections, or questions as we start to close out from anybody up here?
Well, my question would be from a political standpoint, should we be moving should the Black manosphere now be moving into the political arena?
Yes. Yes. That's where the policy's made. That's what we suffer from. That's how your affirmative action jobs got taken away from you. Is the political arena. So either you're going to get with changing the policy, or you're going to suffer from it.
So that means being separate, having separate interests from Black women to some degree.
By any means necessary. Well, how is aligning your political interests with Black women done for you in the past 50, 60 years?
It hasn't done anything.
So you got to do something different, and at least until they come, until they come on board.
Okay. Okay.
If they got their power, they're in office. 80% of your political office holders are black female. And what are they doing for you? What are they doing for black men and the lives of black boys and men?
Yes, yes. You know, and that's funny that, you know, because, and that brings up, because I did a post about Courtney on, I think it's on the Peef Network or podcast or whatever. And what I realized is that black women are very political, but really but really only for their own interests, you
That's
know,
what they're taught.
and
Yeah,
you know,
political phallicism. Yeah.
That's what they're taught. That's what they're taught, and they've been taught that since the 1970s.
oh,
And
you
it's come down.
James Earl Jones has a YouTube video where he's
I
being
played it.
interviewed
I played it.
what his wife.
I played it. I played it. I played it. In fact, I got in a lot of trouble because I played it. Yeah, I found it. I played it. That was 5 years ago. I played it. The Myth of White Womanhood series.
Okay. Yeah, he said, man, he said black women, they've always been just like more more aggressive politically and activist wise. But what we realize is that they're not doing it for the whole, they're doing it for themselves.
Go back to the book The Eyes of Watching God, and when she wrote it. Okay, they were independent then. This is not new. Sojourner Truth, what did she say? She didn't want black men to get the vote because she thought that black men were going to rule over them. And it's been that way, you know, for 200 years. It didn't just start yesterday. That's what I'm trying to tell black men. Okay, sometimes you're just going to have to go, you know, you're going to have to separate and do what you need to do independently. And if it benefits the black woman, so be it. If not, okay, you're gonna have to take care of yourself. Okay, because you're not gonna. Black women are not gonna look to do something for you first. They only will look to do something for their boys first, who live in their household. There is no campaign or a hue and cry about black boys not being able to read. They really don't care. So the only people that care about something like that are black men. So we're gonna have to do something. We're gonna have to separate ourselves from black women and do something.
Well, I'm gonna close it
You
here.
guys should sue the school system. I think you guys should do like a class action lawsuit and sue the schools or something, because
Well, there's definitely grounds for it. There's definitely grounds for it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that being put on the table.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna close it here.
Okay.
Because there's a new series that I want to check out, and I might comment on the Marvel What If series, and I think it came out today. So I'm gonna jump on some of that. I want to thank everybody that came up and took the time to engage me on this, and I appreciate your questions, your suggestions, your reflections. Thank you.
One more thing, Mr. Dr. C. You used to have like this poster you used to put on the back of your videos where it would say "Black men are not this, we are not that,
right.
we are not this." Where is that? Where can I find that?
Well, I was going to say it's about to play it at the end of this show, but you can also find it on a T-shirt. You can get that through the Institute for Black Male Studies. If you go there and click merchandise, you might have to scroll down to the bottom and about 5 or 6 times, because there are pages worth of stuff in there. But there are T-shirts that all of that is printed on, so you can definitely find it there as well. And,
and I want to give a shout out to that, you know, because I think you know, ever since I've known you, you know, you've helped me to overcome a lot of the anxieties, to where, you know, I used to be out in public and I would just be like, you know, just anxious because that everybody would see me as a criminal, you know, because I understand where I'm living at. But now, you know, since the manosphere and since all the information is coming out, it's like, man, I can be free and I can just be a human being. You know?
Dr. Johnson, man, make one point before I go. As a non-FBA, I appreciate you allowing me into your channels along to talk to my brother and sisters, Brother Graves, Sister Kareem, Brother Mir, Pers, and BGS. Thank you for giving me your time. As non-FBA Pokemon in your business. We will win because it's in our genes. Greatness is in our genes. It's a fact. So we'll win. It's inevitable. But just be strong, be focused, and support each other. That's what I'm calling that for the UK, because wherever we are, we face the same enemy, we face the same trials, tribulations. You know, so we have to come together as one, be strong, support each other, and we'll get through this.
All right. Appreciate
Thank
that.
you. All right, guys. And Mr. T, could you please flash that at the end of the screen, please? Fucking
I didn't hear you. Do what?
Could you please flash the slogans you have so I can screenshot it on my phone?
Flash the
Oh,
slogan?
you're ending. The ending.
Oh, yeah, it'll be up in a moment. It'll be up in a moment.
Okay, thank you. All right, you guys have a nice day. Okay.
You too. So you guys take it easy. I'm gonna go ahead and take you guys down, or you can take yourselves down.
All right. Peace.
Please. Okay. And let me add here. All right. So again, thank you guys for joining me. Appreciate that. Thanks for your participation. If you have any other thoughts or reflections on the topic, make sure you include them in the comment section. Remember to like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel. You can do that here on YouTube. You can do it through Patreon. You can do it in a number of different ways, but I hope to get your participation. I'm trying to break 20,000 subscribers, and I'm getting closer. So please make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and y'all have a good night. I am here to tell you, brothers, we are not criminals by birth, perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man-children, sperm donors, child support wellsprings, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, unintelligent henchmen, valueless assassins, pro bono mercenaries, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, emotional tampons, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We are thinkers, inventors, innovators, leaders, fathers, and men. Embrace your humanity, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who genuinely respect you. And remember, your worth is not defined by meeting other people's narcissistic and selfish and unrealistic needs. You define your worth. Peace. What?